It's time to talk running backs. No, not running back holdouts. Fantasy running back rankings via my co-host Matt Williamson. Williamson's top running backs, his sleeper running backs, and talk about some draft strategy here in 2023 for your fantasy football leagues. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on all of your socials. And of course, you can find us on YouTube. Hit the comments there. Make sure you're subscribed up to the new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel, trying to grow that thing. You can also drop us a question for our weekly mailbags. And of course, you can find us everywhere you find your podcasts right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are talking running backs today, Matt, and you just dropped your top 50 running back rankings for fantasy leagues this year, your initial running back rankings. We're not going to name every single one of those 50 guys in order, so you can also always hit us there on YouTube comments or at BD Peacock, and especially at Williamson NFL, since these are Matt's rankings. If you have questions about a specific player, and maybe we'll talk more about some of these guys, later on, and as we get into training camp here, because those things are getting close. Some rookies are reporting. But let's get started at the top, Matt. And have you seen any trends, any significant draft strategies developing for 2023 as it pertains to running backs?
Two things I think are starting to really pop up, and some of this gets a little skewed because this is best ball season. And if you go over to Underdog, which I urge you to do, it is very fun. You have a cheap little entry. That in Underdog, there's a flex, and you also have to start 3 receivers. So receivers are flying off the board, but I think that's going to be a trend in redraft as well. You're seeing a lot less teams go running back, and more people are prone to take a quarterback high or Kelsey or Andrews. So a lot of us traditional thinkers that always start our teams with 2 running backs, at least in the top 3 rounds, that's starting to get phased out a little bit. And then this will lead us right into our ranks, is when I've done drafts where I pick very early, first pick, second pick, third pick, I have a dilemma because right now, I'm not going to tease the receiver round. Well, I guess I will. Justin Jefferson's the number 1 receiver to me. But then there's like a 4-horse race between Chase, Diggs, Kupp, Tyreek Hill. I don't know who the second receiver is. So if Jefferson's off the board and I'm picking 2, 3, 4, I don't know which receiver to go there. So I always take one of these top 2 running backs, which is McCaffrey and Ekeler. And I think consensus is Christian McCaffrey's the number 1 fantasy running back, and he is for me, but tentatively. I mean, frankly, you know this better than anyone probably. He is like the best fantasy producer in running back history. Not just in recent memory, like better than LaDainian Tomlinson and Emmitt Smith and Walter Payton. However, I think the Chargers offense is going to be better this year. Austin Ekeler caught 107 passes last year. He scored 38 touchdowns over the last 2 years. Like, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, the pedigree is really what's wrong with Austin Ekeler. And yeah, you do have McCaffrey number 1, and we do have to preface this these are PPR rankings, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. And shame on you for not playing PPR leagues. I don't know anybody who doesn't play at least half-point PPR at least anymore.
At least play half. Come on. Right.
And half-point PPR doesn't change things a ton, especially with the running back rankings, and might fold things in a little bit differently with the overall rankings. But we're going PPR rankings here. Christian McCaffrey is the number 1, and when he's healthy, he's been the number 1. Austin Ekeler, number 2 for you, Matt. And as you laid it out there, there's a good reason why. And either one of those backs are healthy, they can anchor your fantasy football team. Why not Saquon Barkley, as big of a part as he has been of the New York Giants offense and healthy last year? Why not Saquon Barkley breaking into the top 2?
He's actually 5 for me, which is a little lower than consensus, and maybe I'm just being a little prejudiced against recent news, but I don't love the idea of a holdout for a running back, and I'm a little harsh on Josh Jacobs as well, especially considering the production that Jacobs put up last year. Just it doesn't seem like the best thing for a running back. Maybe I'll change my tune on that, but more so, Barkley and Jacobs just had immense physical workloads last year. I mean, they real carries. I'm not saying Ekeler and McCaffrey don't have real carries, but they're a different style of running back. They don't take the punishment or dish out the punishment that Barkley and Jacobs do, and they're both holding out. There's not that they're older than McCaffrey or Ekeler, but they're not young pups anymore. So I'm just a little wary of those two right now.
Matt has Saquon Barkley 5, Josh Jacobs at 8 in his initial 2023 running back fantasy rankings. Yeah, it is tough because especially as it gets deeper into camp, and if you're sitting there drafting in the middle of round 1 and it's August and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs are holding out, it's kind of hard to feel super comfortable drafting those guys, even if you expect that they will show up at week 1.
And there's no chance they're going to play in the preseason, but that's true for probably all the top 20 backs here. Yeah. I mean, just you're not going to get any reports. You're going to be just a little blind. You're going to have a little less information. And frankly, I'm just really high on Bijan Robinson at 3 and extremely high at Nick Chubb at 4, which is the highest I've seen him ranked.
Yeah, that's those are the two big ones here I'm seeing at the top. In between Ekeler at 2 and Saquon Barkley at 5, you have rookie running back Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons at number 3, and you're definitely higher than on just about everybody. I think higher than just about everybody I've seen on Nick Chubb, having him at number 4 in your fantasy rankings. Talk to me about both of those players. With Bijan, obviously the talent is there. Are you not worried about not knowing exactly what his workload is going to be?
I'm not worried about Bijan. I think he's just a phenomenal athlete, prospect, football player, and they run the ball a lot. I mean, I think they'll run the ball a little less. I mean, but he's also a great receiver. I do get a little skewed. One of my blind spots or weaknesses for fantasy is I do look through a dynasty lens a little too much. So if I make a mistake on someone, it's often a year too early, not a year too late. And he's clearly the number 1 back already in dynasty. But I love their O-line. I'm an Arthur Smith fan. I don't think you use a top 10 pick on Bijan Robinson and don't feed him a ton of touches.
They're going to run the ball, that's for sure. And we've seen Arthur Smith's offenses dating back to past football teams that run the heck out of the football. We saw him do it last year with a 5th rounder. So that's my only question is how much does last year's 5th rounder, who was a 1,000-yard back,
right?
How does he cut into Bijan's touches as a rookie? And just not knowing that, I might lean a little bit heavy toward a Barkley, or how about this guy, Johnathan Taylor, who was number 1 overall in a lot of leagues last year, even ahead of Christian. In fact, I drafted Christian McCaffrey in one of my main leagues at 1.2 last year because Johnathan Taylor was the 1.1.
I love Taylor, and I think he's going to have a huge year. I think Colts fans or Colts opponents are going to despise playing against the combination of Taylor and Richardson. I mean, that's just a nightmare. I think that's even uglier to play against than Hurts and the Eagles backfield. But this is fantasy. It's not the real world. And as a rule of thumb, really strong running quarterbacks rarely dump the ball off to running backs, because they can do it themselves. Why should I dump it off? Lamar, Hurts, they don't dump it off. They just decide to run. And that was something that Richardson did at Florida. Who knows if he will at the pros. And I also just worry about Richardson vulturing goal line carries in a Josh Allen manner. But I think Taylor has a lot of yardage.
So when you consider someone like Chubb at 4 ahead of those guys, I think with Chubb he's maybe the best pure runner in the NFL right now.
Yes.
He's so good. And then on top of that, he doesn't have much competition for touches anymore, and he's not likely to get vultured at the goal line. So with Chubb, I think if I'm reading you correctly, Matt, you just feel really good about everything across the board, talent, usage, knowing that you don't have to project anything with what kind of player he's going to be if healthy.
That's 100%. I mean, he never lets you down anyway. You know, I mean, any of these guys get hurt, of course. I mean, we talk about running back injuries all the time. But assuming he even plays his normal number of snaps, you're always happy with that pick. He can break the long one. I have to think he catches 15 more passes, maybe 20 more passes than any other year. And if he can do that, he might be running back one.
All right, that's the top 6 running backs in Matt Williamson's 2023 fantasy running back rankings. We'll get to some sleepers here and how you might want to attack your specific draft next. Speaking of fantasy football, today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by eBay Motors, and our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long, whether you're prepping for the draft or mid-season scouting that waiver wire. Every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed fits for your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And let's say you go 0 running back strategy, as we're talking running backs here and what that strategy might look like. And you're sitting there at the turn. You've got a late pick, early or late round 1, early round 2. How about CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown back-to-back at the turn? Make that smooth turn in your fantasy football snake drafts and draft Cowboys CeeDee Lamb and Eagles wide receivers AJ Brown. Letter perfect guaranteed fit here. Count on Lamb driving Dak Prescott and Dallas's new look passing game to big numbers, and Brown revving up Jalen Hurts downfield throwing often again in Philadelphia. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit, and it is the same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly, air filters and brakes. And Matt, I just got myself a fender flare. I ran over a stone a long time ago. I've been trying to fix this thing myself, and I just went to eBay Motors, and it was so easy. They knew exactly what my vehicle was, exactly what the part was I needed. I ordered it last week. It arrived yesterday, so I can slap the whole new fender flare on my vehicle with all the buttons and rivets that are needed there. Super easy for me to fix and not spend $1,000 on it. Only spend $50 on it because I got the guaranteed fit at eBay Motors and couldn't be happier about it. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So looking at these fantasy football rankings, running backs, we've got McCaffrey, Ekeler, Robinson, Chubb, Barkley, Taylor to start off the top 6. We mentioned how Josh Jacobs is number 8 for you, Matt, which means Tony Pollard is your 7th ranked running back. And how much do you like drafting at the end of round 1 this year with a couple of receivers, maybe even a tight end, and all these running backs that are, I think, RB1 first round worthy players?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, I could make something up, but I haven't yet found my sweet spot where I want to pick in round 1. I mean, I keep flirting with the polls. Usually I like the middle, but certainly at the end of round 1, near the turn, 11, 12, you'll probably get one of those backs we've already talked about. I mean, you may end up with Taylor and Tyreek. I mean, that's a pretty strong start. You know what I mean? Or even Taylor and Chubb. You know, again, that's quite the backfield to get rolling with. I don't know that I could go Pollard that early, like it's a top 15 pick, but it sure looks like they're going to run the ball a lot. There's not much competition for him right now. And that leads me to the next conversation. Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott. they're all going to probably play football this year. They're going to screw up some backfields going forward.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
Draft Tony Pollard, and they're going to re-sign Zeke, or they're going to draft just a different version of Zeke and vulture some of his. And
he'll get all the goal line work, or whatever.
Yeah,
Right. So that stuff's still on the horizon. Dalvin Cook will probably be someone's lead back.
So then you're telling me there's a tier after 6 for you between Johnathan Taylor and Tony Pollard?
I think so. I'm just a little less confident in Pollard, maybe because I just haven't seen him be the bell cow. But as it stands in late July, he should catch a lot of passes. He's running behind a good line. He's dynamic, and he's clearly the lead back.
7 Pollard, 8 Josh Jacobs. Then we got Ramondre Stevenson at 9, and second-year Jets running back Breece Hall coming in at number 10, and some high volatility potentially there with Breece Hall. But man, you're getting Breece Hall in the second round of your drafts, and that's potentially a huge home run for your fantasy team.
So there's a little news around these two, and one of them speculation, but I guess Fournette is really flirting with the Patriots right now, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Ramondre would still be the one, but you don't want that to happen.
I mean, it would be more shocking if the Patriots had a clear running back one going into the season than if it was some, mucky committee that you didn't know it was going to happen.
But boy, was he good last year on a bad offense. And he was the only show in town, and still teams couldn't stop him. And I'm pretty sure the Jets just put Breece Hall on the PUP list, which, side note, folks, doesn't really mean anything. Like, if you go on the PUP list once camp starts, that means you got hurt at camp, and then you're on the 6-week list. If you go on now, it's really just saving a roster spot. Just keep him in bubble wrap. So that doesn't – it's not as big of a red flag as it would sound like. Oh, he's on PUP. But he's not 100%.
We see guys go on the PUP list to open camp, and then 2 days after camp starts, they're off the PUP list and they start practicing it again. So with those types of players that are already on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, they can come off of that list at any time. But if you get hurt and start on the PUP list later, then that puts you on a new list where you're going to miss the start of the season.
Absolutely. So don't worry about Hall, but he's not quite back from injury is what that's telling me. Like, we just don't want him even doing anything in camp.
And you still have him over number 11, Aaron Jones, and number 12, Derrick Henry. What kind of year do you expect from Derrick Henry?
I think Hopkins helps. I think they'll be dedicated to playing Titan football. Their line is horrific, but I don't know that it matters that much with him. I don't end up with Jones or Henry very often. I kind of think there's a line after Breece Hall, and Aaron Jones is always disrespected. He finds the end zone a lot. He catches a lot of passes. He's probably the best player on that offense. But I don't tend to end up with Jones or Henry very much, mostly because I'm a little prejudiced against older running backs. Back to my dynasty roots.
So a lot of Chubb on Team Williamson's and not a lot of Henry, I'm guessing.
Correct. I don't think I've owned him anywhere in 10 best ball drafts. I don't think I've drafted him yet.
Interesting one for me here. 13 on your list is Kenneth Walker. Where would Kenny Walker be, the Seahawks running back, going into year 2 after a really good rookie season if they didn't draft Zach Charbonnet?
Right there with Ramondre and Breece. I think that those are the perfect neighborhood for him. And Charbonnet's scary, but boy, Walker's a good player. It's just the receptions is what worries me. Is Walker hardly caught any balls at Michigan State. And then you draft a pretty darn good big receiving back, and you're, as well as Smith and Najigba. I just don't see a whole lot of targets going Walker's way, and he's coming off an injury. So there's a couple concerns, but I really like the player. And I think their offense will be good.
That was always the separator last year as rookies between second round, highly drafted second round running backs, Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, because Walker might have been even the better pure runner, but Breece Hall was a really good runner and receiver.
Absolutely. You nailed it. 100% true.
Speaking of being a good runner and receiver, how about number 14, rookie Jahmyr Gibbs? And if we're talking rookies here in this section, and said Seattle Seahawks running back Zach Charbonnet, he's all the way down at 35 for you. So talk to me about Jahmyr Gibbs here at 14 and what you expect for him as a rookie, and why there's such a big gap between Bijan at 3 and Jahmyr Gibbs at 14 in your PPR leagues.
Well, because I think Montgomery's going to get the Jamal Williams double-digit touchdown role at least. I'm not saying he's going to score 17 touchdowns or whatever, but Gibbs probably will not get that role. But obviously they adore him. Whether we think that was drafted too high in the first round or not, I don't care. I just care that they love him, which is talking about fantasy football here. Am I crazy to think that Gibbs, besides St. Brown, might be the Lions' second leading receiver this year? Could he catch 100 balls?
Well, yeah, they traded for Mims.
But that doesn't
going to end up being
move the needle that much.
I don't know. You have Williams who's suspended. So where's the talent? And I think that's part of what they're saying. But Jahmyr Gibbs' rookie year reminds me a lot of Travis Etienne from a couple of years ago. First round pick, and the talk was, he's going to be as much a receiver as he is running back. And then he got hurt, and it was like, that was weird. It was a weird start to his career. So I'm probably not going to have a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs on my fantasy teams, even though he could be huge in PPR leagues, just because the early down workload role, the role around the goal line, and then what does he actually look like as a receiver? And how much work does he actually see there, and how many targets does he see? And I could see, in PPR leagues how it could go great, but I just don't like. I don't like the unknowns of where you have to draft a rookie that high.
I 100% hear you. And another sticking point with these types of, you mentioned ATN, Gibbs, if they can't hold their own in pass protection, and he's really, I know at the combine he was like 201, but he's going to come in at 190, 195. But if he can't at least contribute as a protection player, he's only going to be out there 20, 30 snaps a game. So I've been shying away from him, but I do see the upside as a pass catcher.
It's true. It's like, this is our pass catching back, our passing down back, and he can't pass protect. Well, he's not going to be on the field and passing down unless he's just straight up lined up in the slot as a receiver. So
which
and
then
then you can also tell the story that there's a David Montgomery injury and he's Alvin Kamara.
Oh, he could be rookie of the year. Right. 100%. Yeah. I mean, there is upside there, and boy, he's dynamic, and his offensive line is phenomenal, playing in a dome. There's some good things here.
All right, we're going to get more into the list here after your top 15 guys, some sleepers, and some of the other favorites down the list in Matt Williamson's 2023 fantasy football running back rankings. Next. I do want to thank everybody once again for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. So after Jahmyr Gibbs at 14, you've got your Steelers running back Najee Harris, Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans at 16, and Travis Etienne at 17. Then after Etienne is Joe Mixon 18, Alexander Madison 19, and J.K. Dobbins 20. And actually, I'm going to go one further. Miles Sanders 21, and then I feel like there might be a little bit of a tier break, and those are all, their specific teams RB1s, and you can kind of really have a good idea of what the roles are going to be for those guys.
Yeah, exactly. And two of those guys will have really big years, and you're just kind of hoping that Dobbins catches a lot of passes and stays healthy, or Mixon hangs on another year, because I really was not impressed with Mixon's tape last year, to be very honest. The guy I end up with most in that group, though, is Dameon Pierce, because everyone just kind of goes, I don't want any Texans. I'm not touching the Texans, and obviously we're going to come up to guys like Rachaad White and James Conner, and they don't have any backfield competition either, but nobody wants anything to do with those offenses.
Yeah.
But Pierce, I just don't want the Cardinals lead back. I mean, and I think they lump Houston in that way. And I'm not saying the Texans offense is going to be good, but he's a second-year guy that's a tackle breaker, and he's a good receiver. Scores touchdowns, those are all the things you look for. And Singletary doesn't scare me at all.
No, Singletary doesn't scare me there either. And I do like Dameon Pierce, but the guy I'm eyeballing in this neighborhood is Travis Etienne. I mean, I'll take Travis Etienne all day, a round later than other people are drafting Jahmyr Gibbs.
I see that. I don't think he's nearly the pass catcher that public perception thinks, but he's not bad. I mean, they're going to dump him the ball. It's a good offense. He's explosive as could be. I don't have a problem with Etienne. Maybe I have him a smidge low. I could see Etienne over Najee.
So you mentioned a couple guys there. 22, Rashad White. 23, Cam Akers. 24, James Conner.
Yeah, they're the bad team's number one running back neighborhood.
And then outside the top 20, 25 players, you're going to start looking at guys who are maybe the timeshare backs or the number 2 backs, or maybe your sleepers or players that you hope become the team's number 1 back at some point during the season, even if it's not in week 1. You've got Alvin Kamara at 31, who, with a suspension looming, and those types of players. Do you have a favorite player here, after this area in fantasy drafts where most people have their first 2 running backs, where you're like, okay, I love this sleeper as someone who's going to give me value, maybe not week 1, but later on in the season?
25, 26, 27 to me are really intriguing. Samaje Perine, I'm not buying that Javonte Williams is fine. I mean, that was a really bad injury. I am buying Sean Payton wants to run the ball like crazy behind McGlinchey and the guard they signed, and I don't even care if Perine's good, but if he's the lead back on that team, even just for the first month of the season, that's quality to me. Same with Penny. Penny versus Swift is tough, but when Penny's on the field, he's super productive, and he's never been in as good a situation as the Eagles. So both those guys are short-term fixes. Start them while they're healthy, but don't expect to get 17 games out of them. But frankly, I'm cocky that way. I'm like, I'll start him as long as they're healthy, and when he gets hurt, I'll find somebody else because I'm a good owner.
It's the reverse sleeper. It's the boring, but I'm going to get value early, and then one of these other late sleepers can replace them if they get hurt midseason.
Yeah, right. I'm living for today. It's a week-to-week league. I'm going to start them in week 1 and see what happens, and maybe they're not around in week 10, but my team's going to look a lot different, and hopefully I have a lead over my opponents. I wanted to mention Antonio Gibson, though, because I think most people have Robinson over Gibson, and I think Robinson will get more carries than Gibson. But he's kind of a guy I can't quit. I was really intrigued with him when he came out of the league and early on, and had a lot of dynasty shares. But anyone that's owned Gibson has hated that McKissick has always been there. And now McKissick's gone. So can we see him be the receiver we thought he could once be,
What about Javonte Williams if you're not risk averse in this, later area of drafts? Because
I hate the injury.
Yeah.
I mean, I know all the news is good, but been doing this too long to believe reports in July about bad injuries, especially to running back. I think he had the J.K. Dobbins injury, and we were hearing the exact same thing a year ago about J.K. Dobbins. He didn't get on the field forever. So I love him. I just think that I love him next year.
You know who I like? He's your 32 ranked running back, but Khalil Herbert.
I'm a fan too. Yeah.
I think he's the best back in Chicago, and they're a team that's going to run the football a lot. So give me that combination all day.
It's funny. He might be my most owned back in best ball. You're on their app. You can go look at what percentage you own everybody. He's going really late because everyone says, Fields is going to take all the carries. They drafted a dude. They signed Foreman, but he's the best. And they run the ball like crazy. I mean, you talk about volume running. He's a really good player.
Where do you like the Bears rookie and some of these other rookies? We got Devin A-Chain at 42. There is Kendre Miller at 43. That looks like potentially the heir apparent to Saints running back Alvin Kamara, who you have at number 31. So talk to me about some of these guys late in your rankings here, closer to number 50.
I haven't ended up with a lot of them, to be honest with you. I mean, this Kamara news that his suspension might get dropped a little, plus Jamal Williams being there, I don't think bodes super well for Miller, but it might. I think next year he's a guy to own and probably is their lead back. But maybe, by week 10, he takes it over. I don't see A-Chain as a volume enough guy. My favorite one, not to dispute your ATN conversation, is I like Tank Bigsby. I own him a lot in my rookie drafts and Dynasty, and he's just a different style back to ATN, and maybe they can be a little thunder and lightning, I don't like this. This isn't a great neighborhood, though. I mean,
so you're trying to hit your sleepers before you get to this section of your fantasy draft.
I mean, there are guys like Jerome Ford and my boy Jalen Warren that are under the radar, not highly drafted, but they sure look like a clear 2 right now. I mean, if Najee gets hurt or Chubb gets hurt, you're starting Jerome Ford and Jalen Warren immediately.
like handcuff territory, maybe even if you have enough roster, or someone like Kendry Miller, who we mentioned. Maybe that's more of a dynasty stash for you, Matt. Being the host of Locked On Dynasty Football, by the way.
Absolutely. He is a target for me in Dynasty because I don't know that Williams and Kamara are obstacles for long in New Orleans. And they drafted them pretty high.
So just to reiterate, general draft strategy, it used to be always running back, 1-2. Then it became, zero running back was kind of the trend. Then running backs made a comeback. And then it was like, nope, actually, we're going to go running back early again. Where you at, Matt? You kind of, 1 foot on each side of the fence there? You still like running back, or you kind of go running back and then something else?
I'm old and set in my ways, and I always used to be the guy that went running back, and sometimes even a third one for my flex in the 3rd or 4th round. I'm very open to the thought that that's not the best strategy, because I think I could live with a Gibson or Penny or somebody like that if I had to, if I'm loaded everywhere else, and try to recycle or cycle through RB2s on my roster if I have a star. So I don't have that answer yet. I will the more I get into this, but there's so many talented receivers that if you can, start your draft with CeeDee Lamb and Garrett Wilson, or, Waddle or T. Higgins. I mean, they're just so strong. I mean, they're stable. These 2nd round receivers probably aren't going to bust for you,
Yeah, I try to be a little flexible. So if I start my draft running back, wide receiver, I can still go any direction depending who's there for me. I don't want to be stuck where I have to start drafting a wide receiver in round 3, but I don't like who's there for me, and obviously it depends where you're drafting, if you're early or late in round 1 with your first pick in a snake draft. But I like to be flexible in my draft. So ideally I'm going running back, wide receiver, running back, my first 2 picks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, like if I'm picking 10 and I could get Diggs and Chubb, I'd be very happy with that. And to see what happens from round 3 on. If I want to grab a tight end, or can't believe one of the quarterbacks is there, great. Or, man, Breece Hall's still there, I'm going to grab. I do like the flexibility aspect, starting in round 3.
There you go. Matt Williamson's running back rankings, early running back rankings for your 2023 fantasy drafts. We'll check back in on how things might have changed throughout the preseason. And thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Talk to you next time right here, Peacock and Williamson.